At the dawn of the 20th century, 15 million Europeans immigrated to the United States of America, many fleeing the poverty, persecution, and hardship that had plagued the lands from which they came. One of these was Louis Sostarich. Louis was born in Croatia in 1883, and he grew up during the long collapse of the Ottoman Empire. When he was old enough, Louis traveled to the United States in search of work and a better life. In Baton Rouge, Louisiana, he labored in the lumber yards and tried to save enough money so that his wife Vera could join him in America. But when he returned to Europe, it was on the eve of the First World War, and Louis, still a citizen of Croatia, was conscripted into the army and subsequently captured by the enemy. He spent the remainder of the war in a prison camp. Near the end of the war, a new threat emerged, a new obstacle to the prosperity and the providence of the Sostarich family. The Spanish flu epidemic that killed millions throughout Europe and around the world also took the lives of 3 Sostarich children, Adam, Louis, and Johnny. Eventually, Louis Sostarich again left Croatia and made his way back to Baton Rouge, where he then earned enough money to purchase passage for Vera and for their 2 surviving children, Dorothy and Joseph. In 1927, finally reunited, the Sostarich family migrated to the Strawberry Hill neighborhood of Kansas City, Kansas, joining a community of Croatian immigrants who had settled there earlier. In Strawberry Hill, the family built a new home. Like thousands of other immigrant families, the Sostariches had found a community capable of providing a rich cultural connection to their ancestral roots. But for this family, Strawberry Hill also represented a new life and a future full of new possibility. Many of the official records documenting the journey of the Sostarich family have been lost. But for more than a century, the children and the grandchildren of Louis and Vera preserved and shared their heritage by telling stories. And in 2018, the family recorded several oral history narratives to keep those memories alive for generations still to come.
Yeah, when he came over, now from my understanding, he came over in about, close I could figure, about 1905 or something like that. And he went to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where he had some relatives, and one of them owned a sawmill. So he went to work for this guy, and he worked there for like 5 years, made enough money so he could so he could go back to Croatia and pick up my oldest brother and sister and his wife, my mother. And when he got over there, the First World War broke out. So he was still a Croatian citizen. So he was captured in that by the Italians, and he spent the whole war, I guess, in a camp, prisoner of war camp, I guess. And so of course when he got out of that, of course he was broke. Everything was gone again, no money or anything. So in some way he come back to the States. I don't know if somebody here sent him money, to get him over there again. Back to Baton Rouge, back to the sawmill and working, and his job was cutting down trees, more or less. And what I understand, because he didn't talk about it much, other than telling us little bits of things like what he did, and like chopping down trees. That's what he did. So when he made enough money, he sent my mother and the two kids. He sent them money to come to the United States. He wouldn't go back. He wouldn't go back to get them like he did the first time, because he always said, you see what happened to me when I went over there the first time. I wasn't going to go back to get them, but I'd send them the money and they could come over by themselves. So on the way, after he got them, picked the kids up in New York, and my mother, they stopped at Kansas City, because they had a lot of friends that lived in Kansas City. So from what I hear then, after my mother seen all those friends there, she told my dad, I'm not going to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm staying here. We're going to stay here. Now she said, if you want to go, you can go, but me and the kids are staying here. So my dad said, okay, we'll stay here. And he got a job at the meat packing company. And that's where we lived. Bought his house and everything.
Like those from other immigrant families, the children of Louis and Vera assimilated into American society. They learned English. Joseph changed his last name from Sostarich to Sherry. Dorothy tried to forget the hardships of life in Croatia. The siblings who died during the Spanish flu pandemic nearly were forgotten. It was too painful to remember. But eventually, the grandchildren of Louis and Vera would rediscover their heritage.
I think they came over in 27. I think was when we actually found the records when they came over on the boat. I think it was 1927. And it was
Came here.
Yeah, they came here because by that time, Grandpa there were a lot of people coming here to work at the stockyards.
But I just learned this. I didn't know. It was because Grandma said, if I'm coming to the United States, we're going to Kansas City, Kansas, because a lot of the people from her village were here, and a lot of her girlfriends were here in Kansas City, Kansas. And she said, I will not go to Louisiana. We will go to Kansas City, Kansas. So that's how they ended up here. And my mother said that she never knew her grandparents because my grandmother Veronica was one of 9 children, and she was the only one that survived infancy. And so when she left to come to the United States with her family, her parents knew that they would never see her again. And she said that they died of a broken heart.
Mm-hmm. And when they got here, they couldn't speak English. They could only speak Croatian. So a lot of they laid the cornerstone for the church in 1903, I think is what it was. And then they spent the next 20 years building it. And so, they built a community where they could take care of each other after they had all left and made this journey, from their little villages over there in Croatia here to the United States.
Although over, in the old country, they were in Sokala, and I've shown you the picture of their home in Sokala. And I think losing their 3 sons was really hard. But their quest for freedom superseded any hardship that they had to entail. And I think if you would ask him, he would say it was worth it, everything that they had to do.
I'm sure it was obviously a very traumatic time because Dorothy and Joe would not talk about it, no matter how much we asked them.
Because we tried to get them to come back to the old country. When we were going back, she says, no. The memories I have from there, no. I said, no, Dorothy, you really need to go back so you could see what it's like now. And she goes, it may be beautiful now, but it's not beautiful for me. Very close. I think when the people came from Croatia, they settled in this area. One of the reasons being is that Armours had a plant in Kansas City, Kansas.
Well, he worked at the packing plant until he retired. My mom worked. She was a very good seamstress. She could look in the window and see a dress and come home and sew it. for my siblings, and her friends. I also seen her throw a couple of wedding dresses. If she would have had education, she probably could have been a millionaire in dress design. During World War II, I could remember her bringing parts of fatigue jackets home and sew them together, like the sleeves onto the jackets, and then take them back.
Because when World War II was going on, and the way the community was affected was that the men went to war. And I remember that them saying that if they heard that someone had died from the community, that the church bells would toll. And I remember standing in the bread line with my uncles again, because I think each family was allotted each person allotted one loaf of bread. Well, they would cut the line and get in trouble, and I thought, they're going to go home and leave me here in line. It was that type of thing. That was the experience of the World War. And I think there are names out in front of church, if I'm not mistaken, that list the men that were killed in World War II.
At the church the Croatians built a church in that area. Then they had houses all around it, real close. Like we just lived a half a block from school. It wasn't. You didn't have to tromp through the snow to go 50 miles to go to school. You just got outside and walked up the street, and there you were. Everything was there. The church was there. All the nuns were there. It was a Catholic school. That was there. And they had that bowling alley was there. Had a gymnasium there upstairs from that bowling alley.
And so we would participate like in the religious traditions, in the social they have every year, any party or gathering of our families. We would have Croatian music because several of our family relatives played instruments. And so when we would come together, they would sing. We would sing, we would dance, and when I was little, my grandmother Panjata, at her house, the kids went into, it was like a glassed-in porch area, and she had a big record player, and we would play polka music. That's what she had, and so that's what we would play. But it was kind of an immersion. That's just how we grew up. With the foods, with our family traditions, with the culture that they had been handed down.
Croatian culture flourished on Strawberry Hill. Food was both a connection to the homeland and a source of community and celebration.
Smells, there was growing up on Strawberry Hill, there was the packing house smells, and I don't know if you can call them the smells of the river, but you knew the river was there and flowing, and there was a tamale man that pushed a tamale cart, and if you weren't buying tamales, you certainly knew that the smell was coming from his cart. That was interesting, and just the nights, even in the country, we just lay out at night and listen to nature, and we could sleep out on the driveway, which we often did in the summertime, and just hear the sounds. And here it was busier. You could hear traffic here. You could hear streetcars here. You could hear trains here. There was a train yard here. And it was quiet in the country, and you could see the stars.
I have wonderful memories of Grandpa Sostarich, because Grandpa Sostarich died when I was in the 5th grade. So I remember going to visit him when they lived out like on 54th Street with Eleanor and Walt. And we'd walk in the house, and Grandpa would have a little juice glass on the fireplace mantle of his wine for you. if you wanted to drink some of his wine. And so if you would walk downstairs in the basement, he had these huge barrels where he stored his wine. And that smell of that wine as you walk down those steps it's just more like a smell of coming home. You know, it's a very welcoming smell. That's the smell that I associate with Grandpa Sostarich.
He was very kind and very sweet and just a loving person. Mm-hmm. And he would always, he was older. My best memories of him was when he was older. Mm-hmm. But just a wonderful man. And he and my grandfather, Panjata, were good friends.
Oh, wow.
That's why I have the picture of them together.
But to my father, I could remember as a sibling getting wine. You know, we got the grapes, and I could recall raising grapes there. He raised grapes there. Joe would get the truck, and my father and mother and the 3 kids would go out and pick grapes. We'd load them on the truck, take them back down to Ann Avenue. My father and I made wine. My siblings didn't like to make wine. Well, of course, I didn't like to make wine either, but they done everything they could to get out of making wine. So my father'd run them off, and he says, I want Ray to help me. And so they'd bring the grapes downstairs, and I could remember my father had a grinder and a wine press. He bought it from somebody that made it down there. And we ground the grapes, 12 bushels to a barrel. Just me and my father working down there. We would let these grapes ferment in the barrel for about 2 days, and then my dad would drain the juice off them. And he drained the barrels, we'd have to dig down and get the rinds and put them in the press. We'd fill the press up, and then my dad would say, okay, it's full, give it 1 turn. And that's what I would do, give it 1 turn.
In the house that we had, when I slept next to him in bed. But the deal was we had 2 double beds and a fairly good sized bedroom. And we pushed them 2 beds together. And then my dad was on this end, then me, then my brother Ray, then my brother Tony, then my sister Imogene, and then my mother. 7 of us in the bed, you know. But it was great, just great.
Every Sunday for us seemed to be like a holiday. My father would get into his wine on Sundays, and he would have a little bit too much wine, you know. And he would say, it's 6 o'clock, it's time to go to bed. My father would try to get into some mischief, you know, before going to bed. And my dad was acting like he was a wrestler, and he'd get down on the floor with me, and I'd pin my father down, you know, because he was drunk. And I'd get on top of him, and I could see him grunting and using every muscle for him to try to push me off. And I'd seen that, and I'd fall back and fall off, and I said, yeah, you're a better man than I am. And he said, I told you I was. And then that's when he'd go to bed. And my mother would just sit there and laugh. And the rest of us would turn the radio on and listen to the serials and what have you.
Every Sunday, and this is where I would like to go back in time, that was really a change that I missed. Every Sunday, Grandma would make a chicken dinner, and the family, anyone around would come for chicken dinner on Sunday. She'd have fried chicken, homemade chicken noodle soup. She'd make her own noodles, mashed potatoes. I remember they always asked my dad to mash potatoes because he could mash the hardest. And that was it. That was Sunday dinner, chicken and homemade chicken noodle soup, and we'd all sit around to a table and visit, as many as can get around the table. And for weddings, people in this community would gather as families to prepare the food. Again, chicken and sausage and kraut and povatitsa, apple strudel, puhansa, which was they're like funnel cakes actually. They were all favorite. Whatever I could get a hold of was favorite. But those are what I remember.
When we have Easter and Christmas and Thanksgiving, we always have kielbasa. So that's one of the things. Now, I also like povatitsa, and we'll have that. My children not so much, but it's delicious. And my cousins actually make that, so they're carrying on the tradition. And strudel. Those are my favorites.
The women used to always cook. They made nut bread and got the smoked meat out of the smoker. And you'd have smoked ham, or she'd make homemade soup. One time we was all sitting at the table one Sunday, that was our favorite. Homemade noodle soup, which my mother made. And then they would buy a chicken, and she would fry a chicken for us. And after we got through eating, my father would wait. He would be the last one. And what wasn't eaten up, he would eat the leftovers.
In 1957, hundreds of Strawberry Hill families were forced to relocate in order to make way for the interstate highway system. Still, the community survived. As the locus of spiritual and cultural connection, St. John's Church preserved the diaspora. Many of the dispossessed families continued to attend Mass and events there, but the destruction of homes created lasting hardship throughout the community.
I graduated in '56, and my grandparents moved to 54th Street. That was their second home after their original home was demolished. And Ray was single then and moved in with them. And then he married and moved out, and Walt and I moved in with Grandma. Let's see, I graduated in '56. My father died in '57. Grandma Sostarich died in '58. I was married in '59, and then we had our first baby in '60. And we lived with Grandpa Sostarich in his second home. So it really worked out because he helped me and we helped him,
We when we first got married, we rented a house upstairs from the people that had a house next door to where I grew up in. Then the city comes through, or the state, and says they're going to take half of these houses off the hill because we got to run the freeway through here. And they talked about that for years. And I kept telling my dad, I said, they ain't gonna ever do that. Don't worry, Pop. They ain't never gonna do it. By God, they did do it. So they had to move, when they took their house. And when they bought their house, my mom and dad, when they left the hill, then we just moved into their house more or less, because it was going to be like 2 or 3 months before they took our house. We knew it was going to be about that long. But then my mom and dad got a good deal on a house out of town, off the hill, call it, out of town. That's if you was off the hill, you were out of town.
Well, the family, most of them had to move away from the hill. They had siblings, and they either moved in with their kids, or they bought their own homes, Try to buy a home close to the hill.
What I was going to say about my wife, She wasn't Croatian. She couldn't speak Croatian, but she got in the church and got into their clubs and all this stuff. More people knew her than knew me. I'd go back down on the hill. Oh, you're Lila's husband. Say, what? I'm Hutch. I'm Hutch. Yeah, but you're Lila's husband. You know. So, oh my God, there's more people down there knew her than knew me after a while.
In recent years, a new generation of Croatian Americans have returned to Strawberry Hill to reclaim the neighborhood and to reconnect to their families' histories.
And the funny thing now is, like I say, my daughter still lives there. She said, people are moving back to the hill. She said, if they put a house up for sale on the hill, it's gone that fast. Kids are, like with Croatian kids that live out away, they're moving back to the hill. So the tradition will probably be carried on for a long time, because all the Croats are still there. Even the little ones are starting, So I just hope that, like I was saying, that they keep up the Tamburitzans and stuff.
Yeah, it's, as a neighborhood, this place has always been very interesting. I lived down here with my wife and our kids for, 15 years when we first got married. Cheryl's lived her whole adult life, practically.
Almost.
There are still people that live down here who've lived in these houses for 80 years.
Wow.
And then there's the kids and grandkids of people who lived here 60 years ago who are moving back down here, buying houses and fixing them up. So Grandma was gone long before I was born, and then Grandpa died a year after I was born, so I never really knew either one of them. As I was growing up, I decided I wanted to be down here, so my wife and I lived down here when we first got married and raised our kids here. So, it was like I didn't just talk about going to church at St. John's, we actually went there. And I don't know about any of the other grandkids, but my two oldest are the only ones that went to the same school that my dad went to and that I went to, and then, so that was kind of neat. In fact, I can still remember when they found a bunch of stuff in one of the closets in the school, and it was the school records from the 40s, 50s, something like that. And we actually found my dad's grade card, and then his brothers and sisters' grade cards. I just thought there was something about that was incredibly cool.
All my children were raised and graduated from St. John's the Baptist School. The oldest one, which was born in 65, she was, I'd say probably 12 years old. She went to St. John's there, and then I put her to a junior high, and then school out there by us.
As the grandchildren of Louis and Vera grew older, they became more and more curious about their Croatian heritage. They searched for ways to connect to their family's history through the church, the music, and even visits to the old country.
So most of my best memories have to do with not the ones that I manufactured, but the first house I lived in on the hill is right across the street. So just sitting there looking at it makes me want to cry, because that's where we had our first child. And then, finding Dad's grade card when my kids were actually in school there, and I had gone to school there. There was something about that was very touching. And having our son, who was it? Having our daughter Rachel baptized here. There's just something about that that's, that it's a connection that you have that you just can't manufacture any other way.
Tamburitzans is the name of the music that they play, or the band in Croatia.
Oh.
Doing Croatian music. And so there were a group of parishioners that decided that they didn't want the legacy of the music to die. So they decided to start teaching it to kids in grade school. And it wasn't during the school day, it was on Saturdays that you would come and you would take your music lessons in the afternoon and learn how to play. We first started on mandolins that were strung like a preem. And a preem is an instrument, a smaller instrument in the Tamburitzans orchestra. And so we all learned on that at first and then switched to decide what other instrument we were going to play.
Wow.
So I did not like coming to practice. But Mom kept us in that group. So it really wasn't until I was a senior in high school and the group, the Tamburitzans, went back to the old country in 1973. And that was the first time I ever made a connection between what my mom was having me do and why she thought it was so important that we keep the culture alive, because we got to see folklore groups from Croatia and see that the music and the dance and the things that we were doing here in Kansas City, Kansas, were actually carrying on the traditions of our grandparents. Because they did try to keep the language in the school, because our aunts and uncles all went to the school also. My dad went to this grade school and his brothers and sisters went to the same grade school that we all went to. And unfortunately, the year that I started kindergarten is the year that they decided not to teach the language in the school. Yes. So.
The only way we really learned the language was through the music.
But we didn't know what we were singing.
No,
They showed us the words. They taught us the words, how to pronounce them. For
Phonetically.
years, we sang these songs. We had no idea what we were singing about. We just knew that they were part of our heritage and that these were songs that the people were used to on the hill and wanted to continue, having in the out in the world. And so those are the songs that we sang. There's a fast pace of the music, like the polkas.
Yeah.
There are slower rhythms to the music, like waltz. And most of the songs that we learned to preserve in the group were built around traditions. Like, this is the song you would sing if you were planting wheat in the field. Or this is the song you would sing when you were cutting up the wheat in the field. Or this is the song that has to do with the beginning of spring. Or this is a dance that you would do to help your crops grow. So those are the kinds of things that we learn
And
as
weddings.
part of the Tamburitzans. Yeah, the wedding
Weddings,
tradition.
always weddings. I mean, we even built that into one of our, the finale of our group was a big wedding ceremony, because there was always a lot of music and dancing involved with that.
And then the traditions that go with it.
And all the people in that village, I got to meet them all. And they told me, they said, now, if it wasn't for your mom and dad, we would all died over here during the war. Because I'll never forget that. My dad would send them a package every Saturday over there. He'd go collect some clothes and stuff, from different people. And he'd send it over to that village. And he'd even send stuff that was rationed during the war, like sugar and coffee. He'd send that over there too. He'd wrap the clothes around all that, and then those packages, a little box about this big, 2 by 2 by 2, He'd have me or Ray, either one, help him carry that package up to the post office to mail them. And that was about once a week, every Saturday. But those people said, yeah, if it wasn't for your folks, we wouldn't be here now. And they had a little chapel there in that village, and they took me in that chapel, and the altar cloth, he said, your mom made that. And they still had it. They still got it there.
And so on one of the trips back later, we're going on a little tour of the next bigger town close to theirs, where the church was. and they showed us, the best place to do ethnography work in Europe is in cemeteries. And so we were going to the cemetery, and they were showing us, the graves of some relatives, and they were like, then there's this section of the cemetery over here, this whole corner got bombed during World War II, and so the 3 graves of the Sostarich kids that died before your grandma and grandpa came to the United States were there, but the headstones were destroyed. And we were like, what kids? We had no idea what they were talking about. None whatsoever. So apparently, they actually had 5 kids, 3 of whom died in the flu epidemic in 1918. And the only reason we found that out was because when I had my first child, we named him Adam. And I thought it would be cool to take him over to see Aunt Dorothy so we could see, the generations of Sostariches. And I told her, I said that I had a baby, and I wanted to get a picture of him with you. And she said, what's his name? And I said, well, we named him Adam. And she started crying, and she was like, oh, my little Adam, because apparently one of her brothers who had died in this flu epidemic.
I hope that they will have a sense of how hard and how valuable our freedom is. Our freedom to practice our faith, our freedom to live in a country, that we're so blessed with in the United States. I hope they'll have a sense of patriotism and a sense of family and a sense of their heritage. And the immigrants and their spirit and their steadfastness to make a better life for their family and to cherish what this country had to offer, but always at the heart of everything is their faith, their Catholic faith.
But I think that's what's missing today in the world, is that people don't have connections to their roots. And I think if people felt a connection to their heritage, that we would have a much different world than what we have now, especially with the kids. I teach school, and so I see these kids, they don't even know sometimes their immediate family. And if you don't have a connection to a community, then I don't think you take pride in your community, and you have no idea what your culture is, so you have no connections. You are just there. So especially in times of trouble or times when things are hard, when you have those connections with community, I think it makes it a lot easier for you to get through those hard times, whether it be through the church or through your music or through the dance. Those are all woven into that's my life. My heritage is my life.
This film is dedicated to the memory of Louis and Vera Sostarich.